it?
Yeah.
Welcome to my latest experiment. This is the big one, the one I've been waiting for all my life.
Well, it's a DeLorean, right?
Bear with me, Marty. All your questions will be answered. Roll tape.
Okay,
And we'll proceed.
Doc, is that a Devo?
Never mind that now. Never mind that now. Not now. Not now. All right, I'm ready. Good evening. I'm Dr. Emmett Brown. I'm standing on the parking lot at Twin Pines Mall. It's Saturday morning, October 26, 1985, 1:18 a.m. And this is temporal experiment number 1.
Welcome to Film Discussion, the show where we take a movie, talk about its themes, talk about the characters, talk about the overall story, everything we liked about it, just, go through a movie, talk about it, have some fun, discuss it, that kind of jazz. So today's movie is one on a list I really wanted to get to, because it's a movie from one of the great directors, and I haven't got to a lot of great directors. I did the Coen brothers. There's a really short list of, the best. You got Scorsese, you got Spielberg, Tarantino, Coppola, Kubrick, these guys that I want to talk about at some point. But before I get to that, I want to talk about a guy who's definitely up there in the big picture. He's one of the best directors we have working. He's done so many classics. But not many people put him up there as the same level as these guys. And I don't know why. He's done so many great films. So I wanted to talk about a little film he did a while back, and that director is Robert Zemeckis. I guess I should have said that before I said the film. So the director is Robert Zemeckis. You know him from Forrest Gump. You know him from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, from Castaway, from The Walk that came out, I think, 2 years ago now. He did Allied in 2016. He's a great director. And the film we're talking about made his career. And that film is the first installment of Back to the Future. I know we're doing another sci-fi, another time travel. Well, not another time travel, but we're doing another sci-fi. I did Forbidden Planet a while back, but we're doing one of the classic sci-fi movies, one of the most classic, iconic movies ever made, and instantly recognizable as the film that launched the careers of so many people, made history as being this really iconic series. And we're just talking about the first film today, the 1985 classic Back to the Future. If I ever get around to doing the sequels, who knows, but we're just going to stick with the first one today. Right off the bat, if you haven't seen Back to the Future, I definitely recommend checking out this movie. It's an instant classic. You're going to love it. It's fun. It's lighthearted. It's got really big themes, and it's a great time travel story. And that's something, I'm not a big fan of time travel. I think it's an over-convoluted storytelling device that you can just use to fix all your mistakes. But if you give me good motives behind everything you do in the time travel, yeah, I'm all for it. And this was the first movie that involved time travel, or the first story involving time travel where I actually cared. Because the way the story is told, it's unique, it's fun, it's fresh, and it's just different than what you would expect from anything like this in a time travel movie. So right off the bat, we are introduced to a classic character, a stereotypical guy of the 1980s, and that's Michael J. Fox. This movie made his career. I know he starred in other things before this. He's done TV. He's done so many other things. But this movie launched him into stardom, I think. He's a household name because of this movie. I'm not saying people didn't know Michael J. Fox before this movie. Of course, people knew him. But this movie solidified him as an actor, and it also launched him into this iconicness of the character of Marty McFly. And Marty McFly himself is just an average teenage guy, friends with this over-the-top doctor, and there's just so much about Marty that people can gravitate to, because he's a kid of the 80s. If you're a man who lived in the 80s, or even if you're in the 50s and you see Marty come in, it's so interesting to see Marty act the way he does. He's your typical high school kid. He gets bullied. He has people who don't like him, and he wants to be a guitar player. He's really good at the guitar. He auditions near the beginning of the movie for the talent show at his school, and he doesn't get the cut, and he's just really trying to find what he wants to do. He's at that stage where he's just trying to be himself, figure out what he is, and you learn a lot about his character through that. And then before we even get to the school, before we see all that, he goes into the doc's house. Dr. Emmett Brown, played wonderfully by Christopher Lloyd, one of the best actors, most underrated actors we see. And Marty is just in his house, and he's looking for Doc. Doc's not there. He's out doing something else. And he sees the time. It's like 8:25. He's going to be late for school. And we launch into one of the best songs ever used in a movie. There are times when a song just works with a movie scene. Stuck in the Middle with You and Reservoir Dogs. Definitely the best use. But right up there is The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News in Back to the Future, when Marty is on his way to school. He's skateboarding down there. He's getting so jazzed up, as much as a kid can going to school. He's skateboarding, ducking down from the cops, holding on to the back of trucks. He's getting to school. And this song was so good, it was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Song in a Movie, because that's what it did. This song just made you feel for this movie. It was empowering. It was powerful. Everything about the power of love just made this movie so much interesting right from the get-go. Perfect use of the song. Perfect song. And if you haven't heard the song, go listen to it. The Power of Love, Huey Lewis. It's really good. Great movie. Great song. And Marty, we see him go to school. He's just, trying to get by in there. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the characters who... This was really unexpected. If you're watching into this movie first and you hear people like Leah Thompson and Crispin Glover are in this movie, you're like, okay, well, why would they be playing Marty McFly's parents? They're like the same age as Michael J. Fox. That's a little peculiar, a little bizarre. And when we see all of Marty's family, we see him with his parents, and we see his brother and his sister. It's really interesting because the makeup done for Leah Thompson and Crispin Glover is so good. You feel that they're 30 years older. They have this really nice look to them. There's something about it where it's believable, but you're like, this is not their age. And it's really fascinating. And I'm really impressed with that because it was great makeup, great prosthetics. The hair and makeup was really good. And when we go back in time and see them, that's what they really look like. So to see them 30 years now, and it was really great. And of course, they didn't look like that 30 years later. They looked better. And I thought that was really well done. We got all these subtle little nods to everything that he's going to see in the past. His Uncle Joe, he's not making parole, and then it's just all this stuff. It's really fascinating. We see his brother's a deadbeat, all this kind of things that he can fix later, maybe. And he doesn't know that he's going to be going into the past yet. He's just out there. He has a girlfriend who he meets. It's Jessica. Jennifer. Her name is Jennifer. We just are introduced to this world of the 80s, and that's not the mainstay of this movie. But seeing the 80s in this way, Marty and his girlfriend being bullied, seeing his parents and his siblings, we're getting all this. And then later on in the movie, it's nighttime. The doc calls Marty down. We're getting our first introduction to Christopher Lloyd as Doc Emmett Brown, which if you are a fan of Christopher Lloyd, this movie is probably one of his greatest performances. He has done so much. He's one of these actors that every time you see him, you instantly know it's him. He's recognizable. He's iconic. Just the look of him is iconic in The Addams Family. I think is his next big iconic role besides this. And there's just so much with him that you're just instantly intrigued by. You see, he's got this DeLorean. Interesting. A DeLorean. This is one of the most iconic pieces of film history you're ever going to see is this car. And then he's saying, Marty, I figured out how to make a time machine. We need 1.21 gigawatts of power, the plutonium, and all this stuff. And it's so intriguing because you don't know why Marty and the Doc know each other. And it's so weird. It's so bizarre because this high schooler is hanging out with a guy in his 40s and 50s. And it's so interesting and bizarre. So we get our first look at the DeLorean, and we don't think it's going to be a time machine. It's just a DeLorean. Right? It's just a DeLorean. It's just a car. What's it gonna do? Who knows? So when we get there and we see what's gonna happen, we have this dog Einstein, who's a mainstay in all the other movies, all this stuff. And Doc says, once this thing hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit, which is funny. It's so nice. He drives the car it's aiming right at them, right at Doc and Marty. It's a ways back. It's gonna get up to 88. Marty has no idea what's going on. Doc tells him to film it. We're going to see how these things happening. And then the car starts coming down to them. Marty's freaking out. But right before it gets there, boom, bursts into nothing. There we go. The car is gone. Marty is confused. Doc is happy. We made it. Wait a minute. Doc's telling him about all the stuff that he just did. And then we get the great shot where the vehicle comes back. We see Einstein and the watches are at different times. He sent Einstein 1 minute into the future. It's such an interesting idea to first see the time machine used before we actually do what happens. I always like when things do that, where we see this is not a fully tested device yet. This was the test run. And it wasn't meant to, be used the way it did when Marty used it. So when we finally get, what happens, it's still used. We don't know what's going to happen to the time machine. It doesn't work right away because in 1955, Marty can't use it. So these Iranian terrorists, I think they're Iranian. I am not sure. I cannot remember. But we get these Iranian terrorists, these terrorist groups come in. They're chasing Marty and Doc down. And Doc gets shot, and we think he's dead. Christopher Lloyd, we think, is dead in this part. We don't know what happened. It was crazy. A lot of shit just went down. Why is Marty, what the hell's going on? So then Marty gets in the DeLorean. He's running around. He's trying to get out of there. But does he really remember what the Doc said? Because this is a part I think about the movie. Was Marty really listening to what the Doc said about the time machine? Because he goes 88 miles an hour. He'd just seen that shit happen. He's seen everything happen. The vehicle just vanished. It came back. Is he really thinking? He screws something up. He hits some buttons on the pad in the front of it, making it go 30 years into the past. He's not thinking. He's trying to get out of there. And it makes you think, does Marty really care? Does he know that there's a time machine? Does he understand what's happening? And I don't know. I really don't know if Marty got that. So when he goes back, he hits 88. He goes into the past, and he is confused. And this is where one of my favorite things comes into this movie, is when we first start off in 1985. It's called the Twin Pines Mall. And then when he gets into 1955, he's driving away, he accidentally hits a pine tree, and then we go back later, it's called the Lone Pine Mall. That's a really nice, subtle thing that they could have easily skipped over that. And I think that's a really nice, subtle thing that really made this a little more interesting, a little fun, a little more like these little references that you pick up later. It's so good. It's so intriguing to see. So now Marty is stuck in 1955, and this is where pretty much the rest of our story picks up. Before we continue, there's a character I want to mention because he's a pretty important character throughout all of the films, about the whole trilogy, and that is Biff Tannen. Biff Tannen, I think, is the stereotyped classic bully that we need and that was really important for this movie because he could work in the 80s, he could work in the future, and the character worked in the 50s. Now, we have Marty here, and he doesn't know what's going on. He's just, confused. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't actually think he's in 1955. And I love this thing that we see in every movie of the whole trilogy is that when Marty figures out what time he's in, we pan away and we see the whole city sweeping behind him. It happens when he's in 1955 here. It happens when he's in 2015 in the second film, and it happens when he's in 1885 in the third movie. It's such an interesting, unique shot because it just sweeps away and you see the whole city. Gorgeous set pieces, gorgeous design. You feel like you're brought back to this time that we don't really know because, we're older. Maybe the teenagers who've seen this in 1985, they don't know what this was like. They weren't around there. The parents, their parents, all these older people, they've been there. They've been around since the 50s. They know, they remember this stuff, and it looks really good. It's really impressive. And this is also where we see Crispin Glover, this is a really good performance by Crispin Glover. I'm not a big Crispin Glover fan. I'll admit that right now. I think he's a decent actor, but this is probably the best thing I think he's done. Playing Marty's dad, playing George McFly. And we see how him and his mom, how Marty's mom and his dad got together. And that's because his dad was hit by the car that her dad drove. And it's like, okay, that's really fun. That's a really interesting way. And she felt pity for him. And maybe that's why they ended up together. So now that Marty's in 1955, this is where we get our chain of events that lead to the whole movie. And he causes something that you should never do in time travel, and that's mess up the timeline. And we know a lot about this kind of stuff. There's so many time travel theories, so many movies about this, where we know you mess up with the timeline, it's going to have grave consequences. And Marty does the one thing that literally ruined his only chance of being born, and that's making his mom not feel pity for George. Because he got hit by the car instead. And we see early on that Crispin Glover's character, George, is this peeping Tom. He's looking at the mom through a mirror. I can't remember her name. I think it's, Lorraine. So Leah Thompson's character is Lorraine. So now, okay. So he's peeping at Lorraine through the window. He's got his binoculars, and he falls out of the tree, but it's George McFly who gets hit. I mean, it's not George McFly who gets hit. It's Marty who gets hit by the car, get taken into Lorraine's house. She's in the room. And this is where it becomes such an interesting movie. You feel, at the same time, this is one of the big plot holes I think the movie has. You see that Lorraine is kind of attracted to Marty. And yeah, that makes sense. It's understandable, and it's still weird that in the 30 years she wouldn't remember the guy that looked like Marty, and I don't know. Why would they name the guy after Marty? That's weird. But anyways, so Lorraine's now attracted to Marty. She's not even focusing on George. George wasn't hit. They're out of the picture. Some weird stuff is happening now. And since he's in the future, he's wearing, he's got his orange vest. They think he's working on a boat. He's got these Calvin Klein underpants on. She thinks that's his name. And yeah, it's all these things that happen in 30 years that make things different. The culture, the way we dress, the way we look, it's all different. So they think he's, from like working on the docks, his name's Calvin Klein and all this stuff. But of course he can't say his name's Marty McFly. That'd be so confusing and all that. It's weird that they name the kid after the guy. I don't know. That whole thing is just so weird and so bizarre. So Marty is now in the past and his mom is attracted to him. And why does he go back to school? I'll never know. He goes to the school. I think it's because, he has to keep up this persona of this guy named Calvin Klein that he kind of just forced upon himself. And now he's got to keep up his charade. He's trying to figure out what to do. So he goes to one person who he knows can help. And that is, we see Doc Brown come back. He's younger, and it's such an interesting thing because if you look at Christopher Lloyd, it looks like the guy's never aged. Even from when this came out, 1985, to now. That's like, 32 years? It doesn't look like he's aged. The guy looks timeless, and it's such an interesting thing to see the subtle nuances they do from him in the past to the time there. It's insane because he doesn't look very different, but it's been 30 years. We don't really know how old the Doc is because he looks the same throughout time. So we have Marty, he meets the Doc, he's like, I came from the future and all this stuff, and his time machine worked, we're getting all this. So now we have one of the most important shots in the film that we're talking about, and that is the piece of paper, the picture Marty has of him and his siblings, and it's starting to vanish. You can see things are happening, and they're going away because Marty screwed up the timeline, and we know never screw up the timeline because that is going to ruin your life. It's going to affect it horribly, and because it's directly caused to his life, his siblings don't exist anymore in the future. And that's what I think really makes this better than the two previous movies, is because we've become accustomed to, the time travel aspect, and so is Marty, so is Doc, all these guys. But in this first movie, it's really grounded because they're still learning how to do this. Because when we get to the scene at the clock tower later, they're still figuring out if this is going to work. But when we get later on that they got it, they know exactly what they need to do. There's all this stuff. And I think this is the movie that really made time travel popular. It's happened before, but this one really saying, well, we have to do the next Back to the Future. That's okay, it's okay to do that. So we have Doc. Doc's trying to figure out how to make the time machine work. That's a really great thing. But what has to happen before Marty can go back to the future? Marty has to set his parents up again. And how can that happen when George the Peeping Tom has no interest in getting with Lorraine? And yeah, it's really confusing. It's really weird. But before he has to go set them up, we get this scene that we have in every movie. All the movies. This is another staple of these movies. Is we have them go to like a bar or like a malt shop or any of that kind of stuff. And they're, Marty's sitting at the bar, or he's sitting at the booth at the table, and sitting next to him is his relative, and then you just hear, hey, McFly, and yep, there's Biff. Classic villain throughout time and space. This guy is the villain of all villains. He's the bully of all bullies. And yeah, it just makes sense. And then they both turn around and, Biff doesn't know who Marty is. So he just sees, Crispin Glover, George McFly right there. And it's just it's so fun because it just really makes you think how confused and how shocked Marty is throughout this whole movie. It's just subtle acting, like the way he just looks as he's like, that's my dad? You're Biff. I know Biff. And there's just all this stuff. really layered, really fun, and there's so many things happening at once. This is I don't know why, how much I can talk about how good this movie is, and I will not be doing it justice. This is a movie you have to go watch, have to understand, have to see. So then a big subplot, yeah, it's Doc trying to figure out, how to the time machine work and all that. And our main focus now becomes George McFly trying to get with Lorraine, even though nothing's really worked. He's really awkward around her, all the stuff in the malt shop, and that Marty's trying really hard here. He needs to be, he needs to exist, pretty much. He needs to exist. And he can't do that if his parents don't get together. And he's really trying here. It's such an interesting concept. I don't know how you can think of something like this, where you go back to the past, you go 30 years back, so the main character can be born later, and it's so fun. It's so really interesting. There's so many subtle things in this. Like I keep saying, everything of the Doc in the past, and he's trying to get some certain devices to work. He's trying to get all these things figured out. It's so layered. It's so fun. So the thing with George trying to get with Lorraine is really interested in Calvin Klein, who is Marty. It's such an interesting thing because we get this exchange where she wants to go with him to the dance, this big dance at school, and Marty is just so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable. Why would he go with his mother? But he can't say that, so he says he'll go. This may be his one last chance to get his parents together. He needs to get this to happen so he exists. And while all that time, they figure out exactly when they can get Marty back to the future. Because we're just going to go back for a sec. We're going to go back and we're going to talk about something in 1985. This is a big theme throughout pretty much all the movies again. And that is this clock tower. In 1955, at a certain time, it was hit by lightning and it's never worked since. In 1985, they are trying to tear it down. They want to tear it down, rebuild, make something else, make a nicer clock tower, do something good there. Is the clock tower kind of the MacGuffin of this? I don't think so. But it's probably the most important thing for Marty because he knows when the lightning will strike. He knows when he can get the right amount of gigawatts. He knows when he can get everything right in order for the car to go back to the future, in order for him to have the amount he needs to get back there. But it will all be for nothing unless he gets his parents together. And it's really interesting how he does this. He goes with Lorraine, and he wants to kind of show... He's got this plan of George, right? He's going to act like a bad guy. He's going to be kind of like this gruff guy, be rude, be mean to her, not treat her right. And when he tries that, she just goes along with it. She says how she smokes. She's like, you think this is my first time? Come on, you think I haven't smoked before, all these stuff? And he's just turned away by it. He's like, Mom, I didn't know you did this. Of course, he doesn't say Mom. But his mom always had this, like... She always told him how nice she was in school, how she was this really good girl, this really nice lady. And now he's seeing a side of her that he didn't know existed at the time. And it's fun. It's really unique because of that. Because he doesn't really know what's going to happen next. Let's talk again about Biff. And I keep going back and forth the scenes in this movie because there's just so much to talk about. It's just so fun. I get sidetracked so much talking about certain scenes. But near when we first meet George and Marty and their interaction in the past, we have another great chase scene, another thing that's signature to all these movies. I don't know why, but if you really think about it, a lot of these are the same movie. Part 3, Part 2, they're pretty much just different timelines of the same movie. Is that a problem? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess, but I kind of would have liked to seen more happen. They're still really good movies. I think the second one is still an instant classic. The third one I think is okay. But going back to the staple I was talking about, is the chase scene with Marty on the skateboard. In 1955, we get the best one. You can say what you will about the one in Back to the Future Part 2 on the hoverboards. That again is another classic thing. But I think the scene in this one just works better. It's just more fun. There's just a different layer to it than the other ones. Because it's like, oh, here's a callback. Here's another callback. And are those movies callbacks? I'll testify that they are just callbacks to this first movie. So what what we get is we see Marty. He's getting chased down. He's holding on to the side of the car. He's trying to get away from Biff and his bad guys from his gang. Pretty much, they're pretty much a gang. Biff and the gang, and I just love the way the characters all look in Biff's gang, because the one guy with 3D glasses, there's a guy in the future with glasses too. It's so weird. Like, you don't have to walk around with 3D glasses, bro. And I don't know, it's so funny. And then what happens at the end of each and every chase scene with Biff and Marty? They land in shit. They hit manure. Yeah, Biff's car gets filled with manure. That's a staple too. See, every scene in these movies, everything we see, everything we know, they all become staples of what this franchise is. Every scene, every shot, every time the DeLorean pulls up, the whole time when the DeLorean first drives away and you see the fire coming down from the wheels and the license plate is spinning, everything becomes so iconic in this movie. It's unbelievable. This, I would testify, nothing, no franchise, no like big blockbuster franchise has more iconic scenes than Back to the Future, because there are so many things you can pull from this, so many things you can use in other movies, other media, all these things, lines that are instant classics that I can't think of right now. Why can't I think of any besides "Hey McFly," that kind of stuff? There's so much like that you can still use. It's just so intriguing. And again, quickly, before we go back to Marty at the dance, the DeLorean itself. This movie made the DeLorean popular. You can go see the DeLorean, and it doesn't matter. You could, be a huge expert of cars. You can know everything you can about automobiles. You'll see the DeLorean, your mind is going to go to Back to the Future. It's going to go to the time machine. That's all you're going to see. I had a chance once to see the actual DeLorean used in the movie. Gorgeous. I'm pretty sure it was restored, redone. It was gorgeous to see a beautiful car. You just have this sense that this is it. And no other vehicle has hit the zeitgeist like the DeLorean. Sure, there's the Batmobile. There's the Ecto-1. There's KITT even, Maybe the Mystery Machine, I guess, from Scooby-Doo. But none of them have the same style and feel or the realism that the DeLorean has. And yes, it's a time machine, but the DeLorean is the realest of the real of all these classic Hollywood cars, these things. I mean, besides, like the Fast and Furious shit or whatever, like Steve McQueen drove or something. But the cultural, the iconicness of the DeLorean is timeless and will always be remembered as one of the best vehicles in film history. So now we'll go back again to the dance, and this is where Marty, he sees that side of his mom, and here comes Biff. I'm sorry, before Biff comes, here's George No, Biff does come first. I'm sorry, I watched this the other day. I didn't take a lot of notes as I wanted to. So yes, Biff comes first, and he sees McFly, and he kicks him out, punches him down, he gets hurt, and Biff is pretty much... Another thing, Biff really wants to get with Lorraine, and that's an interesting thing that we didn't see in the future. Not in this movie, at least. In part 2, yes. But in this timeline, we did not see, in 1985, Biff really wanting to get with Lorraine. All we did was say hi to your mom for me, kid. And, maybe he still kind of does, but he's older, he's more mature. Nah, fuck that. He's not more mature, he's still an asshole. But he doesn't really have the same kind of motive. Maybe he does. He could. Again, he could. I'm not going to say anything about that. But he kind of sexually assaults Lorraine in this movie. And again, I understand it's 1955. Still, we're a little more cultured than that. Things are a little more mature now. But these people are supposed to be in high school. And it's really hard to watch sometimes because she's trying really hard to get away. She doesn't want to be there with Biff. But Biff is kind of forcing himself in there. He's forcing... Oh, man. That does not sound good. Biff is taking advantage of her, and that's it. And here we have, through the countless efforts, the countless times he's tried, George McFly finally stands up to Biff, and he punches him. He defends Lorraine's honor, and we're finally back into this moment where Marty can potentially be born, but there's still more things happening. And the scene where George just punched Biff's down, that changes the whole course of what's to come in the future. It's so good. It's such a nice scene to see George finally have his moment. He's kind of, throughout the whole movie, been this kind of like squeamish nerd guy, but now he's here. He's in the forefront. He's defending the honor of Lorraine, of Leah Thompson, and now we're finally going to see them go to the dance. And we think that's good. We think that's enough. And yeah, and then, Marty wakes up from his punch. He wants to make sure George is doing fine. But then Biff comes back to get him. He goes into a trunk. Biff puts Marty in the trunk. So Biff's goons, I'm just going to repeat myself here because I kind of felt a little mumbled up before. So Biff's goons lock Marty in the trunk of this band. The band's that's playing at the school's trunk, and they're like, oh, how are we going to get this guy out? And he's like, the keys are in the trunk. He's like, what? The keys are in the trunk. So when they finally get him out, they need somebody else, to play with them because, their guitarist has this broken hand. How's he going to play guitar? Who is playing guitar? Who is this good guy who needs to get back to the future? It's Marty McFly. Marty McFly steps in to save the day for the band, and it's also a last way for him to get his parents back together. Because, as we see later on when we're with Marty and he's playing with the guitar, his parents aren't doing so good. George doesn't know how to make the first move. He doesn't know what to do. Somebody cuts in, steals Lorraine for the dance, and he needs to, get back in there. They need to kiss, solidify the whole thing of them being together. And this is how they do it. Marty's got to step in. He's got to help again. And then they're playing their music, and they get to that one song that makes everything go good. There they go. There's the kiss. There's the pow. They're back at it. Marty has to leave. Marty has to leave. So what does Marty do? He wants to finish on a high note. He's playing the classic song, Johnny Be Good, way before the time of these people. Classic for him. And he's just rocking out. He's shredding. Again, this is the difference in time, the way things are different in 30 years from where they are now. And even when Marty's playing that in there, it's still a classic where he's from. So this is still coming. It's still coming up. Excuse me. It's still a classic from where Marty is. So he's playing it. He's shredding. The band's trying to keep up. They're so confused. And everybody's so conflicted on what is happening. They're so like, what is going on? What are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? And they don't understand the music. They're rocking it at first, but Marty gets crazy. He's going intense. He's sliding on the floor. He's going on his knees. He's just shredding it. And then he stops. Everyone's confused what he's doing. He's like, that might be a little too much for you guys now. That your kids will love it. And yeah, it's funny. And Marty now has to go back to the future. He's going to make it. He's got to make there. But before that, he has one last encounter with Lorraine. She's like, I wish it would have worked out there, Calvin, but I don't know, for some reason I got this weird vibe like your family. And he's like, oh, you'd be surprised. So then she goes with George, all that. We're finally getting the pictures coming back. His sister, his brother, they're all there. And I feel like the whole time I've been talking, I haven't really said a lot about Christopher Lloyd in this movie. So I want to take this time just to talk about Christopher Lloyd and everything he did in this movie. When we first see him and he's talking about, everything he needs for the DeLorean, I might just be repeating myself with a bunch of this stuff. But I think I didn't do that. And he's not very prominent in this movie, Christopher Lloyd. He's more prominent in the sequel, and he's more prominent in the third movie, because they focus on his character more. This movie is really about Marty trying to get back to the future with the help of Doc Brown in the past. And we get this really fun scene where Doc's trying to hook everything up. He knows when the lightning is going to strike, so he's hooking everything up. And he's trying to get everything hooked up because it's not long enough. It's not working like he wants it to. I wish Doc was more prominent in this movie, and I get that we have him more in the sequels. He doesn't play a big part in this one. He's just kind of there to help Marty out. He's just kind of watching him, getting him together, They have to hide the DeLorean and all that stuff. So when we finally get to the end, when the storm's coming, lightning's down, it was a beautiful day before, but everything's bad now. We're coming down to the wire. Marty's not there yet. And we see Doc talking to police officer. He's like, what are you doing? Just a little weather experiment. A great exchange dialogue. Dialogue is on point in this movie. It is so well done. So incredibly well written. It's such a fun, fascinating script. Everything about it. Again, just go back and just listen to the dialogue. Because it's sharp, it's of the time, and each one I think it gets a little better and better the way that it fits into the timeline of the story. Maybe not 2015 because we're not there yet. Of course, who knows, right? So, we're coming down to the wire now, and I think this is one of the best movies that builds tension for our characters out of any movie. Because this is make or break for Marty. They only have one shot, and we get that a lot. And you can break tension really well. You can make tension really well. It comes down to how you do the camera work and how you make everything matter. We know the exact time the lightning is going to strike down. We know Marty has to hit the pole on this cord at that exact moment, and he has to be going 88 miles per hour. All that stuff that lead up to this one small moment is so important because it makes the whole movie. And before we even get there, the storm's coming down. Doc is hooking back up some of the wires, and we see Marty is telling him, Doc, I have to tell you about your future. And this whole time, Doc has been persistent. Say, don't tell me anything about my future. I don't need to know. It's going to screw things up. A man should never know his own fate because it's just going to lead to problems and it's going to be bad. So now, Doc gets it hooked up. We're coming down to the wire, like I keep saying, and the tension builds. The camera goes from the car, it goes to Doc trying to get the wires all connected. They're breaking apart, they're not long enough. He finally manages to get them all together. Lightning strikes, he gets shocked, he gets blown back. The pole hits on the DeLorean. Marty gets sent back to the future, and Doc becomes a genius. Just taking a drink, sorry. Throat kind of hurts talking like this for so long. So Marty's back in 1985. We just spent a full movie with Marty in the past. We've seen him see his parents as teenagers, Biff as a teenager, Doc 30 years younger or the same age if he doesn't age, that kind of shit. And we go back to the future, and we see the good Marty has done. Biff's no longer this big, high-strung, powerful guy who takes advantage of his father, says shit about his mother. He's kind of this overweight guy who's washing the truck that Marty got. Yeah, Marty got Chuck now. He's not asking to borrow his dad's car and stuff. He says mom looks healthier, his dad looks healthier, his brother now has a job, he's not living off his parents. Everybody is healthier, they're happier because of what Marty did and his impact on it, really. And that's really nice to see. Seeing the different storylines from 1985 and 1955 was really nice. It really helps this movie look gorgeous, be more interesting, more intimate in times. And it really interests me how little we see of Marty's girlfriend Jennifer in any of these movies. You think because, they're dating, she'd be a main part. But no, this story is really about Marty and Doc and even Marty and George and Marty and Lorraine, but not really on Jennifer. And even in the sequel, it's not really about Jennifer either. So, we get back. Marty is there early and he goes back to see the Doc that night. And he knows something that's going to happen to the Doc. He knows the Doc might die because he tried to leave the Doc a letter in 1955 telling him what's going to happen. The Doc ripped it up. But then, Doc surprises him. He gets shot by the terrorists. And what happens? Gets up, shows he's wearing a vest, and that he retaped the letter that Marty left for him because he said, what the hell, might as well do it. couldn't hurt, right? I don't want to die. So we see that happen. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Wrapping everything up nicely. All that stuff. Marty gets his truck, and then he's about to take off with Jennifer to go on their weekend plans. And then here comes in the DeLorean, but it's flying, and we're all confused. What the hell is happening? And then, it's like, Marty, I need you to come with me to the future. Doc's like that. Even Jennifer's coming in. It's like, Doc, we don't got enough road to make it there. And he's like, where we're going, we don't need roads. He flips down his shades. They take off in the sky. Biff's like, what the hell? And it ends. That is the end of Back to the Future. So let's I'm gonna sum everything up. Just talk a little bit longer because that's what we do here. If you haven't seen Back to the Future, go back, watch it. It's worth it. It's a good laugh, a good fun, good ride with the family. Seeing Crispin Glover and Leah Thompson in their prime, being these funny characters that know Marty and then name their son after this guy they knew 30 years ago, and whatever. Seeing all the subtle references to things Marty changed in the past and the future and all that stuff is really good. Seeing the relationship between Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd is really good. And if nothing else, go see it for Biff. He's an over-the-top bully who just is really fun. All these characters, the way the story is told, the directing, the dialogue, the editing, Robert Zemeckis knocks it out of the park and then goes on to do better and greater things. But none of them have the cultural impact or hit the zeitgeist the way Back to the Future has. So that's going to do it for this installment of Film Discussion. If you have a movie you'd like me to talk about, let me know. I'm always open to this. I do plan on doing more, and I'd like to announce that the next director we will be talking about is Martin Scorsese. So that'll do it for me. Go watch Back to the Future. Have a good night. Good luck, kids or adults.